Okay, did you hear that?
I
Yep.
did.
Recording in progress. Okay. Now let me just mute everybody here. Let's see. The problem is finding where to do these things. Now I've got it here somewhere.
Marvin, I would think we're all Zoom literate enough to mute ourselves. Why don't we just
Yeah,
mute
I think
ourselves?
Okay.
that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, sounds good. And then you can unmute when I say it's your turn to talk. Okay. All right. So then what I was thinking is probably the best way to start is just updates. Oh, hi, Gail, another
Hey,
person here. Welcome. I thought we could just start with going around with updates, answering the question, what have you done since our 50th reunion? Might be a good way to start. Maybe just like a 5-minute update or something, what you've been doing. What are you retired? Do you have a family? Do you have grandkids? You know, there's a lot to cram into 5 minutes, but just kind of let's start with that. We'll go around. It is optional. You don't have to share anything, but if you like to, just let me know. And then we'll go on from there to just have more comments. And then I thought we would end with an open forum where everybody can just chime in whatever they want to say. And we'll see how long it goes. Okay. Um, so I thought just to kind of set the scene that I would start first with just kind of an update for what I've been doing, and then the rest of you can chime in if you'd like to do so. Um, Basically, I'm still working, but I'm working part-time. I work full-time and at the Swedenborg Library. I'm in charge of the digital collections over there, and we're scanning old New Church journals and things like that. We also have um, things on the Academy. So if you want to see your class banner, your class yearbook, or maybe some pictures of the class from reunions, go to the Swedenborg Library New Church Digital Collections, and you can check that out. And I can give you the link to that at some point if you'd like to. When I hit 70, I decided it was time to stop being full-time. I went to 20 hours a week, and now I'm down to 8 hours a week, which works out well. I go in 2 mornings and can do some work, get some extra spending money, and keep the project going, which I started like 15 years ago. Um, I'm married to Wendy, which is right next to me on my screen, at least. Um, um, so she is going to be helping out by watching the chat. If any of you want to add anything to the chat session, I'm not going to be able to look at that because I'm trying to keep everything going here. We do have 3 daughters, and 2 of them are married, and we now have our second grandson, which is also a second grandchild, and he is over in Luxembourg. So he gave us an excuse to go over to Luxembourg in the fall, which is why I wasn't around for the Charter Day reunion, mini reunion that we had at Charter Day. Tough choice between Luxembourg and Charter Day, but Luxembourg won out. And the other grandchild is up in Massachusetts. We're going to be going up to visit him next week. Um, I think that's about it for my update for now. Would anybody else like to share anything? Let me see your hands if you do. Okay, Gail, you can unmute. Fire away.
Okay. First of all, Marvin Friesen, please note, he gave that to me at graduation. And
Wow.
it's amongst all our other enamel signs. My husband's a graphic designer, so he likes that sort of thing. I retired just over 7 years ago. And I'm managing to fill my time somehow. I'm involved in things in the village. I'm part of a rotating team of editors for our monthly village newsletter. I was a proofreader in the last 10, 12 years of my working life, and I've been able to, that's the thing I discovered I really wanted to do when I grew up. And I did it, and I'm still using that. And one of the things I've been really enjoying in the last year and a bit is proofing the new Christian Bible Studies project to digitize the entire Potts Concordance. And that has been absolutely fascinating to do. I love it. And I like that I'm working with lots of different proofreaders around the world. And we occasionally bump up against each other, but not so often. We're now on the second proofing, sort of skim proofing, Steve David is calling it. And just to pick up the final typographic errors and punctuation things and capitalizations and odd misspellings. Like one I found was the word was supposed to be infernal, and it called it internal. And it was, there are some important mistakes that you have to correct. Anyway, I'm really liking doing that work. I've got 4 kids, all grown up, and each has 2 children. Our oldest lives in the village 10 minutes drive away. Our son lives in Edinburgh and has adopted brother and sister, and they've had them now for about 7 years. They were 2 and 4 when he adopted them, and they've now had them for about 7 years. And there are some challenges that are coming out as the kids grow, but they're doing absolutely fine. Our next child, Tessa, lives in Colorado, and we get out there every couple of years. She is quite worried about America at the moment, as am I. I want to find out what you all think, but it's politics, and there's other things to talk about tonight. But she's quite concerned. And our youngest child lives in Bristol. She married Anders Fayon, who some of you may know. And they've lived now in the UK for 12 years, something like that. They have 2 little kids too. And it's their youngest's birthday today. He just turned 7 years old. And we finally have a family WhatsApp group. So everybody's piling in with happy birthday, Tristan. He's very bright red-headed. He's a sweetie. What else? I do Pilates once a week. I play tennis or pickleball once a week. I cycle around the village just because it's quicker than walking. Richard and I go for walks a lot, right from the door often, because we live in a beautiful part of the country. As Polly has, she wasn't in this part of the country, but she's been recently in England and did a coast-to-coast walk, and we sort of were communicating a little bit while she did that. And that's about it, I think. And we're well.
Thank you very much, Dale. Anybody else like to add something? Polly, would you like to follow up?
Love
Louise?
to. Thank you, Dale. And I just have to say, Gilbert, you have not aged one bit since high school.
Oh, I doubt that.
You're amazing. You're amazing. I haven't been to any of the reunions because I will tell you that when I went through my divorce in 1987, the new church here in Pittsburgh was really tough on me, and there was no acceptance, and there was an extreme amount of judgmentalism. And I frankly lost all interest in the new church at that time, and then eventually resigned and have since joined the Presbyterian Church. And I felt very, very disconnected from Bryn Athyn, from anything to do with the new church. And being on this call today even was a question for me. But I'm really glad to be here because you're all fine people. And I love connecting with you. When I was married to my first husband, we adopted 2 boys, Carl and John, who are now 42 and 40. Carl lives near Chicago, married, has 2 girls, 10 and 7, both of whom are sick right now, one with flu and one with pneumonia. So that's not a household I'd like to visit right now. My younger son, John, lives here in Pittsburgh, and he's married and has a little daughter who's at the same preschool where John and Carl both went, at a different Presbyterian church than the one my husband and I have joined. I was on my own for a lot of years, which was a really good thing for me because it was a real growing up time. I think I really needed to figure out who I was and who I was by myself. And I finally met my now very wonderful husband, Eric. His last name is Stein, and everybody, of course, says things like, "Oh, which Stein family?" Well, no Stein family that any of you know. Believe it or not, there are Steins out in the world who are not New Church Steins. And he's a great guy, and we've been married since 2012. I worked full time until 2011 and decided then that I was tired of working full time and continued teaching piano, lots and lots of piano, and added on to that. Plus, I helped two guys that I know who had adopted two little boys. I helped look after those little boys from 2011 until 2016 when they moved south to Charleston. So, like Dale, I'm extremely worried about our country and I'm extremely concerned for people on the margins, as these guys are, and as are lots of people at our church. I'm fearless about talking about politics, and if we get into it, great. And if it's your choice not to, I also understand. I've really loved just teaching piano and keeping in touch with all of these little kids and a lot of adults. Everybody brings something to their lesson, some more than others, and it's really a joy to do this work, and it's a blessing. So I feel very fortunate. I live in the same house I've lived in since 1973, when Paul and I, my first husband and I, moved into this house. I'm only the second owner of this house. And it's amazing to me that I've done anything for this long, but here I am. I feel pretty good. As Dale said, Eric and I did the coast to coast last year, which is 192 mile across England. And Dale, next year, we're going to do the Cotswolds walk. So we'll be in touch and figure out if there's a way that we can see each other, because there could be. This summer, we'll be biking in Ireland. So we both figure we're just going to keep doing active things until our bodies say, well, you're done. And then we'll start taking river cruises or something. So it's great to see all of you.
Nice to have you. Anybody else? Peter.
Wait a minute. Now,
Okay, there we go. Hi, all. This was my wife, Joanne. We got married in 1989, and it was just in time before my dad passed away. And we have one son, and he's got two kids who are 5 and 2, and they're delightful. So we've enjoyed taking care of them at least once a week. I worked construction for 25 years until I started losing my sense of balance and started falling off of walls while laying out roof trusses. So I had to change careers, and I went to work for the post office like David, but instead of being a city carrier, I became a rural carrier.
for 25 years.
For 25 years. And I just retired about 3 years ago from that. And now I'm enjoying retirement. I'm loving sleeping in the mornings. I introduced Joanne to doing community theater almost from the first few months we were together. I've done community theater now for 35 years, and I just retired from doing that about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. But we did together over 35 to 40 plays. And it was the greatest hobby a person could ever have. We made a lot of great friends. And Joanne had a talent for directing. So while I was on stage, she was directing, and I didn't always act in her plays. I would do lights and sound occasionally. So that was a lot of fun.
And build my sets.
And building our sets. Now we have purchased an RV, and we are in the process of traveling around the Southwest while Joanne is still working as a massage therapist, a very good one, with high demand for clients. Yeah, so she can't really fully retire yet. Maybe never. But we're taking a week every month, and we're going somewhere. And we're concerned because the national parks that we had planned to visit may be closed. I mean, our Carlsbad Caverns in the south of New Mexico is closed. So, you know, it's going to put a dent in our plans to go to the Utah parks, which is what we were going to do later this year. Now we're afraid they're going to all be closed, and we're disturbed as hell about that. So we're figuring other places we can camp, and we take our 2 dogs with us in the camper. It's a 30-foot Class C, and we do need hookups. We can't just rough it. Roughing it days are over. We did that a lot when our son was in Boy Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
But that was a long time ago. He's just turned 45.
Mhm.
And incidentally, Dale, happy birthday. You turned 74 just a few hours before I did. Yeah, that was interesting. And like I say, our son just now turned 45. So yeah, he got married late in life, same as me. But he's got a younger wife, same as me. And they keep us young, don't they? I'm telling you.
We try.
Yeah. So we're enjoying our 2 dogs and our 2 cats. We have an acre of land. And so we're hoping we can sell it in the next year or 2 once we fix it up a bit, and then buy a smaller house. And we're thinking maybe even going down to Silver City, which is a charming community in the mountains down to the south of us. So we're going to look and explore around there later this year. It's been a lot of fun living out west where it's dry climate, and the biggest thing we have to worry about is drought, really. We haven't had near the rainfall we used to get. So yeah, we're hurting for that. But otherwise, we'd love to have anybody come out from the class, come out and stay with us for as long as you might like to do, or if you're passing through overnight, that would be great. So yeah, we're on the same page as Polly politically, I think. And so we're going to suffer for a couple of years at least. And we'll hopefully survive. I mean, we might even have to move to Mexico. You never know. So we'll see. We'll see what life brings us. Good to talk to you all and hear your stories.
Thanks, Peter. Hey, Sonny.
Hello. Let me pull my hand down. All right. So I counted the other day how many places I've moved to. Now, this includes every dorm room and every time my dad is a minister. I've lived in 37 places. Isn't that crazy? So it's a miracle that we've lived here in New Hampshire 6 years. That's almost a record. All right. But since high school, I moved on, and I decided you may know that I have a relative who's mentally ill, my mother, and that got me interested in psychology because I didn't understand what was going on. And that led to a career in psychology. And it also led to a career as a mediator. I'm very interested in conflict resolution. So I have had a chance to get trained by a lot of amazing people. So I've taught in about 5 colleges in upstate New York, and then Bernathen College for about 20 years, retired about 9 years ago. And then started doing mediation for church groups, And I was a minister's daughter. I saw a lot of conflict between ministers and the head of the board and the Sunday school teacher and the sharing of the bill. So I thought, oh, I've been trained even before I was trained. So I really find it fascinating. So I've probably helped about, I don't know, a dozen different church groups. And I also started doing mediation for couples that are thinking of divorcing. I'm not there as the therapist to try to put them back together. I'm there to help them solve problems like selling the house, who gets the kids, who gets the car, and so trying to help them do it in a civil way. So that was really interesting. So I did that a lot more after I retired 9 years ago. On a different note, I think I was a little too timid when I was young. I wasn't very athletic, and I wasn't very good at singing or being on stage. So somewhere in my 40s, I decided I had to be braver. So first of all, I got a passport, finally, when I was like 45. And then I learned how to ride a motorcycle. So for the last 30 years, I've been on motorcycles whenever it's not snowing outside. My husband, I have to say, he's the one who got me into that. Okay, husband. Almost 50 years ago, Neil and I met in graduate school out in Iowa. And next year, we celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. And he's a wonderful man. 50 years, isn't that incredible? So I think one of the reasons that I really loved him is that he didn't have sexism. He didn't look at me as a female thinking I couldn't do things. And unfortunately, I found a little bit too much of that in Bernathen when I was back in the 60s. Oh, you can be a nurse, you can be a teacher, that's it. But he has encouraged me to be brave, So the first country I went to was Jerusalem, Israel. I mean, I got really brave. And that led me to another thing I wanted to be brave about, is I didn't think I could write. I have a lot of writers in the Rose family. My grandpa was a famous writer, and my mom and dad and everybody. So I decided I need to learn how to write a book. So eventually I wrote 5 books. They're not bestsellers, but it was really exciting to give yourself permission to write a book. So I wrote one about Mary Magdalene and wrote one about the other 4 about psychology. Another thing that I did to be brave was before I came to Bernathen College, I decided to teach in a prison, maximum security prison. So every day I'd go inside with other college professors and we would teach. It was amazing. Did that 5 years. So I'm getting pretty courageous in my old age. And I think it's helped me not be quite so afraid of the things that I know some other friends and relatives of mine are afraid of. Of course, I'm worried about the politics. I'm worried about conflict, but I hope that in opportunities, I can be a conflict resolver, even if the people are politically really opposite or religiously really opposite. I have found that as part of my courageous effort is I needed to distance myself a little bit from the general church. I have not quit it, but I decided I cared more about the Swedenborg Foundation. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, somebody put me on the board, and then right in the middle of all that, there was a lot of conflict in the Swedenborg Foundation, so they made me the president. And my job through doing Zoom like this for the whole pandemic was to help resolve conflicts between staff and board members. And it's okay to have different opinions. People come from all different walks of life to be on that board, and we're trying to reach lots of different people, but not part of the general church. Anyway, so I go forward in general church, just great. Thank you for raising me, but I'm much more independent now. Anyway, I have 2 daughters up there, Heidi and Emily. Neil and I have 2 daughters, and I'm not going to be a grandma. So around the time we retired 9 years ago, we realized Neil, my husband, has a sister up here in New Hampshire who has a daughter who at age 40 had triplet boys.
Oh, wow.
3 boys, and had to work. She carried the insurance for the family, had to work, couldn't afford childcare centers for 3 boys. So they asked me to move here. So we left down in the Pennsylvania area and moved here. And I got to do that childcare thing for the first 5-6 years of their life. It was great, along with the grandparents, my in-laws. So I really love these little boys. So that I got to have the great Aunt Sony experience instead of the grandparent experience. So that's been wonderful. And now in my elder years, some of you know that I like to sew. And I've been trying to improve my skills in the sewing area. And I have found 2 nonprofits that need me to sew for them. So I sew 3 or 4 hours a day. And I love it. And now people are donating fabric to me because they are cleaning out their closets. Pete said, it's time to downsize. So if you've ever been a craftsperson or know somebody, they fill the closets with fabric ideas, raise your hand if you know what that means. And then at some point you have to empty those closets. And so I go, I'll take them and I'll turn them into blankets for little kids who are in the hospital. So Project Linus is my favorite project. So almost every day I make a blanket and we send them off to the hospitals for little kids to cuddle. That makes me feel really happy. I get to sew, I have free fabric coming to me, and then I get to hand them off to the lady who takes them to the hospital for the kids. So in closing, I'm feeling very happy and grateful that I am not sick. Unfortunately, my daughter has serious cancer, and we are occasionally her caregiver. She's 45 and is trying to recover, but it's pretty rough. So hard for her to work right now, hard for her to be completely independent. So for the last 3 years, we have been caring for her and helping her. Try to stay positive, go to the doctor and do everything you have to do. Neil and I have absolutely no illnesses. I take Advil PM occasionally. That's it. I don't have any meds. So I know any day now I'm going to get something. But right now I feel really lucky that I have purpose. I have things I can do for my family, my daughter, my great nephews, and sewing like crazy. And I'm healthy for now. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hey, Louise.
It's nice to see you after some of you 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, I last attended the 40th reunion. I couldn't go to the 50th because my dad's younger sister was turning 100 in Chicago, so that took precedence. I've had an interesting life. After high school, I went to up to Wilkes College in Wilkes-Barre, graduated with a degree in education. That I never went into teaching because I just hated the school system that I had student teaching in. But I've always used the education because as a, supervisor and manager, one of my favorite things was to mentor my staff to help them grow in development. And it just was so exciting when you see the light bulb go on in their head and they catch on to something and then they go become successful. A lot of the people that I've hired, I've been very gratified just to see, I had a small part to play in their life in terms of their careers. But what was, I think, most significant about my college experience is that I had 5 friends, 5 girls in the dorm, and we stayed in contact for over 50 years. We're sisters by choice. Thanks to Zoom, we Zoom every 2 weeks with each other. So we've all grown together with, graduating from college, careers, raising kids, taking care of elderly parents as they had health issues and passed, and the whole gamut of the life experiences. And they've been one of the most enriching experiences in my life. So I've been very grateful that way. I ended up working in the pharmaceutical industry for 30 years, half of it at Johnson & Johnson and half at Merck. And half of that was in human resources. My first job out of college was in a business because I had an interest in that more than a school system. And I started working for the director of compensation and benefits in a manufacturing company in Jenkintown, not too far from Bernathen, and got interested in the field. And I spent 18 years in that till I got bored and burnt out that I knew in January it would be exempt level salary increases. June would be non-exempt salary increases. February would be affirmative action plan. October would be benefits. And it got to be really boring after a while, too predictable. But what really got me out of it, thinking of you, Sony, is the employee relations aspect of it was like, I got really tired of big little kids fighting like little kids on the playground. And so I thought, okay, this was around 1990. I was getting bored. I thought, I want something different, but what am I going to do? I need to work. And in human resources, I'd worked with an executive director of clinical research, which is drug development, helping reorganization, getting jobs with the same skills and levels kind of sorted out for her organization. And I remember coming back to my office one day and saying, gee, if I wasn't in HR, I'd really like to be in clinical research. I didn't quite understand exactly what it was at the time, but it intrigued me. We'll never say never, because I thought that would never happen because I had an education degree and no science background. Pardon me. So 10 years later, the division of J&J that I was at in Horsham was transferred to California, was laid off. And by that time, I'd figured out I wanted to go into nursing to get into clinical research, to get that science background. So the severance package basically paid for me to go back to school. My husband was very supportive, so I didn't have to work during that time. So I got a bachelor's of science in nursing and then went on to get a master's of nursing. And the idea was that I was going to go back and go into primary care to get some actual experience. But what happened is that the Clintons, I guess it was around 95-ish or so, they were talking about revamping the entire healthcare system. So when I started nursing school, there was a shortage of nurses. By the time I graduated, you couldn't find a job. So plan B was to go back into the pharmaceutical industry. That's what I did. I was quite happy that that worked out that way. And then I stayed there until 2012. I quote unquote retired because I'll back up a little bit because I retired to take care of my husband with advanced dementia at the time. He and I got married 1981. It was a package deal, 4 kids, 15, 16, 18, and 20 at the time. I was like,
Wow.
I had to have been crazy, but we dated for 4 years. And it was a good thing that we did that because we got our problem solving. We had excellent practice in problem solving because all of you have had raised kids and gone through the teenage years. They're extremely trying. And on top of it, the older and the youngest girls were fine. The middle two, my second stepdaughter was alcoholic, and my stepson was hooked on drugs, mostly marijuana and hash. Fortunately, she's been dry for 9 years now, and he never went beyond marijuana and hash to anything more. But that broadened my experience in problem solving, I can tell you that. But it was worth it. Richard was 15 years older than me. And for some reason in my early 20s, I knew I needed to marry a man at least 10 years older because I was too competitive with guys my own age. So this way he would be in a different stage of life than I was. I was never particularly interested in having children, producing them. I don't have patience with little kids. I don't like to cook. I like to eat, but I don't like to cook. Even though I can do it well if I put my mind to it. So for me, this arrangement was perfect. I didn't have to produce the kids. I was not the kid's mother and still am not. And we have a great relationship. But we agreed that I would be their friend, their mentor, whatever worked out. And when we got married, there were only 2 books out on step family situations. And what I got out of these 2 books is that here are 2 things that you should always keep in mind. Number 1, never put the biological parent in the position of choosing between you or the child, because the step is typically good. 99% of the time, they're going to lose. And always let relationships evolve as they're going to. And some people get along and some people don't. In my case, number 2 was a real problem. And we've since worked that out, decades later. But it was PTSD. I don't really remember too much of the first couple of years. And the kids had a tough time too, because I was very different than their mother. She was perfectly fine person, but after 20 years, she and Richard just kind of, it happens. They grew apart and they had nothing in common except the kids. So anyway, so that was great. Let's see what else. So at this point, oh, okay. So I retired 2012 to become Richard's caregiver, and that was probably the closest to hell I've ever been in my life. That it was a learning experience again. I've never been pushed so far against the wall and was so overwhelmed as I have. But God works in mysterious ways. So I remember one day, this was what, I think January of 2014. I asked Richard if he wanted something to drink. He said, yeah, give me whatever it was. So I brought it to him. The brat took the glass of I guess it was a Coke, I don't know, but he just poured it. He dumped it on the carpet. And I was ready to strangle him at that point. Any of you who've had caregiving experiences or 2-year-olds or teenagers, you just want to do this at times. And I remember just walking out of the family room and screaming to God, I can't take this anymore. I need help, but I need it now. And I sent like an express prayer up to heaven someplace. Well, a week and a half later, the call came through that the Veterans Administration nursing home that's about an hour and a half from where I live accepted him. So he went in. And then 6 months later after he went in, he didn't know who I was. I was familiar to him in some way, but he couldn't quite figure out how. We'd only been married, how many decades? And then he passed in 2016, and the approach I had was like, thank you, Lord, for this blessing. You're freeing him from his body, because this was a bright, energetic, incredibly talented guy he regressed to basically being a 2 or 3 month old baby. He could breathe and he could sleep, and that was the extent of what he could do. So for him to be released from that, I thought that was a blessing. And it was a blessing for me not to have that pressure again. And, for our marriage, I still feel connected. I still wear my rings. I still feel like I'm married. He's just somewhere. He's doing his thing, and I'm sure he's happy and having a great time. And I'm happy and having a good time a number of years later too. I'm each of you have mentioned being grateful for things, and I've been grateful for the experience of being married to him, of having the 4 kids, of having a very fulfilling career, amazing accomplishments that when I was basically told I was stupid in the Bernathen school system, it's like, well, I think I've accomplished more than anybody. Just not everybody, but I certainly exceeded their expectations, and maybe that's what spurred me on to it. I'm not sure. Let's see what else. Oh, Polly, I had a similar experience in terms of religion. I've always accepted the Bernathen church faith. I never felt a part of Bernathen, and I came there when I was 10. Being a military dependent, with Dad in the Air Force, we'd lived in Europe, we'd lived a bunch of places around the country, and I just found the isolationism and the arrogance in the community really offensive. So, but my connection was always singing in the choir. I don't have a good voice. It's not a solo voice, but I know how to use it. And it blends very well. So that's the strength of that. But after Richard got so sick, I couldn't travel an hour. He needed 24-hour care, and I couldn't travel an hour from where we were living to Bernathen and then have 2 hours of rehearsal and then come back. So the Alumni Association said, hey, we're going to have a chorus concert at this Episcopal church in Harleysville. And I told them, well, I can't leave my husband long enough to come to the dinner and get together with everybody, but I can attend the concert. So anyway, I ended up taking some time and attending a couple of free organ concerts there. And I approached the music director. And I said, hey, I've been singing for 35 years. Do you have a need for an alto? She said, sure. So I've been there since 2013, and musically, it's expanded the repertoire. I'm just amazed. This particular church is like a home to me. It's like a spiritual home, but it's a home in a community sense that I'd never experienced before. They're just people that I really enjoy being with. And the people in this church get together, get along in an amazing way. It's miraculous. But musically, I've been on 3 trips to England. And Dale, you'd be probably familiar with this, that in August, the full-time choirs, they go on vacation. So the churches need other choirs from around the world to come and fill in for a week. So my church has gone to Winchester Cathedral, Lincoln Cathedral, and 2023, Exeter Cathedral. And these were highlights of my life, to sing in 1,000-year-old churches, cathedrals, just packed with history. It just was an amazing experience. And I'm hoping that we'll go back in another couple of years. So let's see what else. So in this Episcopal church, I'm pretty much involved. I'm on their management team, getting involved in a lot of activities. So that's pretty much where I'm at, and I'm happy and grateful for all the blessings I've been given over my life. And I hopefully look forward to more years of health and whatever. Oh, one other little thing. I started 2019 a little writing, a mentoring business to help people write. So I've helped 2 nurses with their Doctor of Nurse Practice, DNP, write their dissertations. And the work I did in clinical research, when you're writing for the FDA, it's like writing PhD dissertations. So this was right down my alley. The first one got 100 in her thesis, and the second one got, I think, 98. Not bad, right? I'm working with another nurse and writing an article for publication, and working with an occupational therapist on a Parkinson's disease study that she had done some work, but she had no idea. She had no training in writing protocols, really, or doing formal research. But she had some really interesting information that some of these, she's a yoga instructor, and some of these Parkinson's patients that she was working with would comment, I have a feeling that I'm being healed and I'm feeling better, even though I've got this terminal disease. And I thought, that would be really interesting to explore. So we're at the point right now with that, analyzing the data. So I hope to have that published sometime in the next 5 years. So anyway, and I do counseling mentoring people, writing resumes and interview preparation, and they go on to do well in whatever their endeavor is. So anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good for you, Louise.
Anybody else?
Hey, Marvin,
Hey,
Mary Jane. I don't know if I'm showing up there or not.
sure.
I joined, I walked away. I couldn't really see. I wish I'd been able to see to turn off the camera as I was walking. Hopefully that wasn't too distracting. I walked away from the family gathering and I've just been walking the streets here in Oceanside. I found a tree stump I can sit on for a little bit in the shadow so I can see my screen a little bit. I heard the very end of Sony's, and then I don't know who I just heard, but rather remarkable life that I enjoyed hearing about. Who was just
Please,
speaking?
Mary Jane.
That was
Louise.
Louise.
Louise Beebe.
Oh, hey, Louise.
Hi.
Wow. Wow. that was
I'll second that.
delightful to hear. Congratulations on, I feel like I wanted to say congratulations about 5 times while while I was listening. So I don't know how many other people are on and who's on that already knows everything about me, how much would be worth sharing, but I think I could say just about anything that
In
needs
the
to
story,
be
because I haven't seen you in 50 years.
said. Okay, no, we have not seen one other. Well, I could give a thumbnail in just a few minutes, I think, because I have not done a fraction of what you've done. I think my life has been very predictable. Bergen and I got married after graduating from college. We had and raised 4 sons who've all gotten married and now we have 9 grandchildren. They all have kids. We've spent most of our, I did teach. I didn't teach while our kids were real young, but I went back to teaching when they were in school. We lived most of our lives in Southern California, where Bergen was offered a job when he graduated from college. And we, at the end of his career, he did a giving back kind of thing of going and helping out the college with their business degree after he'd retired. So that got us back to Bernathen, which I hadn't really anticipated. But 2 of our kids settled on the East Coast, and we love Bernathen. And Louise, I heard your experience in Bernathen of not feeling great about it, and I felt sad about that. I had the experience of going up there from Louisiana, and the girls I was in the dorm with, I just loved, and I felt so many of them I admired. I wanted to try to be more like them and the people I knew in the community. Well, Dale, if you're out there, my friends, Barry and Dale and Polly, we used to hang out with, and any night, there were others, but just people that I thought, oh, Bev, I loved. I just loved Bernathen. And I guess I was unaware of a lot of what was going on, for people. I was oblivious to an awful lot. And I feel, I guess, in some ways grateful, in other ways I feel badly that I didn't know what was going on for some people. I think that may be, of course, so we ended up having a home in Bernathen now where we spend about half of the year, and we kept a home, a condo in Southern California where we spend the other half. And 2 of our kids live near us here, and 2 of them live near us on the East Coast. One of our sons actually teaches at the academy. I guess those are all there. I've said everything already, Louise, and others. And I'm sorry.
Hudson is quite an accomplishment.
I'm sorry I didn't get to hear those who've shared before me, but there you have me. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane. We are recording this session, so you can listen to the whole thing later, okay?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Judy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're kind of far away, but I think we can hear you.
I have to be on the camera. First of all, I want to say hey to Louise. We were childhood friends, grew up together. Don't know if you know who I am. I'm Judy Clymer.
I do. I recognize you.
Okay. And say hi to my two cousins there, Tony and Dale. And I miss Mary Jane, but Gilbert and Mary Jane were in my wedding. Mary Jane was my maid of honor. Gilbert was supposed to be my best man, but he got drafted. So
Right.
Warren's brother ended up being our best man. At any rate, Martin and I got married in 1971. We moved to Kitchener, which is where he was from. Eventually built our own house because we started as soon as the snow was gone and finished before the snow fell again. So it took us 7 or 8 months to build our house. I don't know how many of you know, Warren passed away in October. See, now you're going to get me emotional. He had a large cyst in his abdomen, and I went in to drain the cyst and found it was full of cancer. So they basically sent him home to die. He died 2 weeks later.
Excuse me, could you get a little closer to the microphone? It's kind of fuzzy.
Then my face won't be in the camera, but
Thank you.
is that any better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. And then Polly and I were friends in our childhood. She lived at the other end of town. I mean, we're going way back. Mary Jane was our DECA president when we were in the dorm. So everybody got to love Mary Jane. But since Warren passed, it's been pretty darn quiet around here. I don't exactly know what to do with myself. We just had a huge dumping of snow, and we're just totally buried. So I'm just waiting for winter to go away so the spring will come and maybe inspire me somehow. I don't know if there's anything else you want to know. I have 3 children.
To you, Judy, it's a really tough transition. Just please be kind to yourself and take every day as it comes. And
I'm trying.
there's nothing that's going to ever really ease the pain. It just gets easier to deal with. It's one of the roughest things to go through in your life, to lose your valued husband.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's still pretty cool, pretty new. Anyway, I have 3 children. My daughter Jennifer lives in Oregon and runs a certified organic farm, 5-acre farm. My son Jeffrey lives in Maryland, and my son Anthony lives here in Kitchener with me. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to know.
Thank you, Judy. Nice to hear from you. Anybody else? Hey, John.
Wonderful to hear from everybody. Mary Ellen and I just celebrated our 48th wedding anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and gets better all the time. I'm very much an optimist. I've not retired myself yet. I had 7 years as a judge advocate in the Army, and I've had more than 40 years now as a lawyer for the Federal Railroad Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And I don't quit because I'm having too much fun. And I'm in the current situation pulling a lot of my friends and people who've retired and know me off the ceiling with everything that's going on. But I'm very much a constitutionalist, and I think that we've weathered some severe storms and the political storms over the history of the United States, and we'll probably do fine. But we have to fight for it, and I'm willing to do that. Um, we have two daughters. Our oldest daughter just this summer married a man who was uh, the senior uh, career diplomat at the Irish Embassy, and she is now living in Dublin with him. Our younger daughter has been married over 11 years, and we have two granddaughters, 9 and 7, and they're a wonderful joy. They're close by, so we get to see them fairly frequently. Uh, and Mary Ellen was just diagnosed with the beginnings of diabetes, so we're dealing with that a little bit. But my health, I think, has been pretty good. I mean, I have no complaints. Anything can happen, but I'm an optimist. And I had served between ages of 40 and 60, three three-year terms on the General Church Board and two three-year terms on the Academy Board. But I'm very understanding of people's disenchantment with some things, and I am not uncritical of those organizations. But as with a lot of other human organizations, I think we do the best we can, and we can always do better. And we just have to keep talking with each other. And for people who have had some angst with those organizations, I'm convinced that the Lord deals with each one of us one-on-one, and there are many, many ways to get where you're going. And so follow what works for you. Absolutely. Um, and I think that's a good enough summary for now. Oh, Dale, I was going to say, I really, my older daughter got a master's degree in political science from the London School of Economics. So we had made a couple of trips to England, and I love your adopted English accent. It's really terrific.
Oh.
Thank you, John. Anybody else?
I guess I can go.
Sure. Go right ahead.
All right. I I went to the 50th reunion, and since then, a lot has happened. Uh, in about 2019, our younger son, who lives in Montana, he and his wife asked Leslie and I to move out and help them raise their kids. So we began the process of evaluating our life and selling our business, selling our house, and it took until 2022. We had to get rid of everything, and we had to sell our business, and it was such a big life change. It just was astounding what happened in those years or 2 years. But anyway, it all fell together, and in 2023, the very beginning of 2023, we threw all of our stuff in a car, and we moved out here to Montana, and it was a difficult situation because Leslie and I are both four-generation Chicago area people, and everything we're familiar with, we just we left, and all of our personal belongings, everything in our house that we've accumulated for 30 or 40 years, we had to evaluate, do we keep this or do we throw it away? That's really really difficult, but we ended up making it here, and we've spent 2 years fixing up an old house, and it's the one thing leads to another syndrome, which I'm sure everybody is used to. But the culture is different here in Montana than it is in the Chicago area. It's the difference between living in an area of 9.5 million people to 70,000. It's and a Western culture as opposed to an Eastern culture. Really, quite a different thing. So I think it's a good thing to do, but it's really hard. you evaluate what's really important to you. And so that's not a bad thing. And you throw a lot of junk away. There's a lot of junk that gets thrown away. So we have two sons. Our older son is in Pittsburgh. He works now for the Girl Scouts of America. And he just started that job about 6 months ago. And he called us and said, I think every girl in the United States should be part of the Girl Scouts. It's the greatest thing. So that's what he's doing, and he's married to a pastor at Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, and they're not planning on having any kids, and so we're out in Montana, where our younger son is a pilot for the Forest Service. So he's flying all summer long missions for putting out fires. So he's gone a lot of the time during the summer. And his wife, I'll back up a little bit. He met his wife in the Democratic Republic of Congo while they were both serving mission. And so she's Austrian and a midwife. Now she's in Montana working for the hospital. And so as a midwife, well, no, as a nurse, she's doing night duty and all kinds of stuff. So we have a lot of filling in for them, which is exhausting and good. I think we're where we should be. But as an example, one other thing I wanted to say was that as soon as we came out to Montana, we recognized that there's a different mentality. There's an outdoor mentality here that didn't live quite so much in the Chicago area. Everybody is outside. They're outside in the winter more than they are in the summertime, and they're
horses.
And Leslie and I really fit in well with that because we're that kind of people. But as an example, Thursday, just this last Thursday, we went to the University of Montana women's basketball tournament, and I'm part of the Missoula Symphony Choir. So we sang the anthem at the beginning of the basketball game, and then my grandson in his middle school orchestra played halftime. And while we were watching the game, my son had on his phone a picture of our granddaughter who was playing hockey in about 5 hours away, and she made a tie score goal in ice hockey. So the evening was sort of like why we're here, and it was great. It was something that we wouldn't have been able to do if we were in Chicago. Yeah. So that's where we are. Oh, and this house required a lot of fixing up, but and that's the reason why nobody else bought it, and we bought it because we bought it pretty much sight unseen. However, it's got the most beautiful view in town, so it's worth it.
Good, thank you. And someday you'll get it fixed up, right?
I think so. I about 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Gil. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can go next. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay.
you're on. Thanks,
Sorry.
Mary.
All right.
It's funny to think about putting your life into a few little words, isn't it? But listening to everybody makes me think, well, my heart really has been in family. That's true for most of you, maybe, but I've just loved having children, and we get to live next door to one of our daughters and her husband and 5 grandkids, and I love it. I love it. It's so fun, even though they're growing up now, and several of them are off at college and all, but still, it's family lights my life. And the other thing is, it's, a lot of us have mentioned the church in some way or other, or the Lord, and, he's just, happens to be what fascinates me the most. And so what I want more than anything is to hear what all of you think and feel about the Lord and about heaven. And anyway, that lights my fire too. So if anybody ever wants to talk about that kind of thing, I find it so interesting. And one of the things I've done with that is oh dear. I embarked on this project of memorizing the book of John, and this is the year when I'm going to have completed it in just a few more weeks. So, like each Easter, our family and a bunch of other families, we go out to a local lake. Yes, there's a lake here in Oklahoma. And at sunrise, and one of the parts of the little service we do is I get to do this Bible storytelling of whatever chapter I've memorized this year. And so, I remember like 15 years ago thinking, will I live to finish this project? And here I am now. I'm almost there, just a few more verses. So those are some of the fun things in my life. I love pickleball, Dale. Yeah, and Louise, my heart goes out to you when you're talking about taking care of people. That was most of my life, was taking care of our daughter who had special needs. And that's going to make me cry. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I didn't do as well as I would like to. Let's just say that. But anyway, I think part of that brought me to the Lord more because I recognized my need. Yes. And so, but she also lit up our life. She was hard, but she was very charming, at least in her mother's eyes. So anyway, that was a hard part of life and she died, let's see, 5 years ago. It's been about a few weeks since her death. So, but I'm glad, that she is where she is. Very glad for her. But that was hard. Judy, yeah, my heart goes out to you too. Yeah. And Polly, I've been to Polly's house a few times. I love that place. It's beautiful. And I just treasure the chance I've had to be with her. And I've gotten to talk to Sony some. And it's just, John, I saw you and your wife recently, and I'll always treasure that. And, Dale, I've been to her house and I love it. And so many great memories there. And, Gilbert, yes. So there's just, my heart, Marvin, yeah, I don't know Wendy very well, Peter. I haven't seen you since school, but this is so delightful.
Thank you, Mary.
Hey, Mary, this is Mary Jane jumping in. Mary, I'm so glad you brought that up about being interested in hearing about maybe we could call it people's faith walk or where they are in relation to God or organizations or whatever. But I don't know how much of that I missed before I signed on. And so I'm interested about that. Of course, I've quoted your line from when we had the little gathering for our 55th of the Church of Pickleball to any number of friends when we I've got to know that way, and your explanation of what you meant by that. But I'd love to hear other people talking about that. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thanks, Mary Jane. Marvin, did you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I was reluctant to even sign on because I'd been out of touch with so many people that are dear to me. There's not a day goes by that I don't think of anyone in Bernathen, put it that way. You're always on my mind, always. And what if and all that sort of thing goes through my mind all the time. And well, my mom and dad, with their lack of education, didn't really help me too much growing up. I didn't know where I was. At times I felt I didn't even deserve to be a life even. Is this real or is it a big dream? My doubts abounded. And I didn't get too much encouragement from my folks for anything. I'm not trying to blame them. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. They did the best they could after all. And the hottest fire makes the best steel. And that said, all the trials and tribulations I experienced going through Banathan and all the pitfalls and everything, every single one of them, it made me what I am today. In some cases, many cases, bitter. But that's part of the lesson. And it's a lot like the cathedral glass. We are all different colors in that cathedral glass, and each piece of glass in all that brilliant glasswork, it came from several different particles that made that color, and that's what makes us the whole fabric of what you see there, and it's all very beautiful. And I admire that kind of artistry. And many years ago, when my wife and I were in Prince George, and what made us go there was I lost a lot of money contracting in Dawson Creek. As you can imagine, there's not a large clientele that can afford to build a house or renovate to the nth degree, and so on and so on. And I left a lot of money on the table in some projects. And when your cash flow is gone in contracting, so are you. So anyway, we chose to get out of carpentry, or I chose to get out of carpentry and do something else, because carpentry was going the way of the blacksmith. And not so nowadays, because to hire a tradesman is very expensive. Anyway, we chose to move to Prince George, and I went back to school for a couple of years. And at first I started into computer drafting, but I deduced that I don't want to look at a screen my whole life. So I got out of there and into a partner course that was in the same sort of classroom environment, and that was called Construction Engineering Technology. And it was a hybrid course of a whole bunch of subjects into one course, and you learn about soil mechanics and strength of materials and physics and all sorts of things, and drafting was part of it. And there were about 14 of us in that class from all walks of life. Some kids were pipelined in directly from the high school, and they didn't know too much themselves. They weren't much of an addition. But a lot of us were what they call mature students. And we chugged through the courses and got the end of it. About 2 years and 3 months later, we were at the tail end of the course. And after all that, I was the only one left. Everyone else crashed out for various reasons, bad marks or not enough time to do projects or whatever. And I stuck to it and I got through it. And I was the only one left. So I finished that and hired on with an engineering firm, and we were designing and building logging road bridges and roads into resource areas for extraction of timber and all sorts of things. And even though when I was home in Prince George, which geographically is the diagonal center of British Columbia, and British Columbia is about 1,800 miles long and about 600 to 800 across. So it's very large. And if you're in the center of BC, you're going to travel, especially in a resource environment. So I, even when I was home from work in the field, I was still gone. because I'm in the drafting office, plan checking drawings to go out to contractors and so on. That wasn't the life I wanted either. So position with the city of Prince George as a building inspector came up, and I applied for it and got it. And I've spent the last 29 years in my career as a carpenter, even doing building inspection for the municipal government. And that's to make sure all construction complied with the building code. And I came to see that use as a means to not drag people through the building code, but guide them through the building code system to get to the other end and complete the project. And for the most part, it works very well. And I was quite an asset to the contractors because they looked to the building code, which I remember building houses back in Dawson Creek in a code book about a half an inch thick. Now it's, well, that thick and about 5 volumes. And it's very verbose, and you have to be a Philadelphia lawyer to figure out how it goes sometimes. But I pulled them along the way. I helped them as much as I could, and it made quite a difference. And I was well thought of and missed a lot by the clientele when I retired. They all wanted Marvin back. So anyway, when we were in Prince George, I was part of the Railway Museum Society. And I enjoyed that because I loved trains so much, and I loved hands-on work, fixing up the museum site and so on. And then they had a meeting one night. They had this all this grant money that they got from the federal government to build a visitor center. And they had to spend it, otherwise they were going to lose the grant money. So I figured, you know what? There's not a carpenter or even an architect or draftsman or anyone that's got to do with buildings in this group. So I figured I've got to do something. So a night before the meeting for the following week to decide what kind of a building. And I figured, well, I got to do something because they're going to end up with a box to show off as their visitor center. And I didn't agree with that at all. That would serve no end. So I chose to craft a sketch of what the building should look like. You should employ a witch's hat roof and on the building, and a promenade that's extended out from the building for people to walk, or run some luggage carts near the train, or whatever the case may be. And I came up with something, and I banged this out in about, I don't know, 5 hours.
Cool.
And I said, you must incorporate something that says railway without having a sign. And so I took it to the meeting, and I put a blanket over it, and I explained all this, and then I took the blanket off, and they said, oh, we got to build that. And then one of them, there's a lot of compliments and everything. One of the guys says, I nominate Marvin for project manager. I didn't want that because that would take me away from the family again. But there was nobody else to do some of the work. So some of the work, well, we put it through as a building permit request, and we had to get an engineered set of drawings for it because it's a public building, and according to the building code, public buildings have to be professionally designed. That's understandable. So they modified this roof a little bit, and they came up with something, but it did incorporate the witch's hat roof. And they had the promenades all around the whole thing. And in my drawing, I had ship's knee braces. And well, I ended up building those, cutting the timber and everything, bolting it all together. And I put every one of the 26 ship's knee braces, I put them in myself because nobody else was around or even showed up to help with the building. So I put those all in myself. And then the carpentry class from the vocational school nearby, they did most of the building. But I helped them as much as I could without spending too much time away from the family. And then we ended up with a building that's worth about $5 million if you wanted to build it nowadays. But back then it was all built with volunteer labor, and we gave tax receipts for trades that needed the money, but they would contribute for the favor of us advertising that they helped us with this and that and the other thing. And it's still there today. And they have increased their rolling stock of old railway cars. They've got a caboose that's over 100 years old, and a couple of steam trains that aren't running, but they're there for looks anyway. So it's all well and good. And then because I was spending too much time with that, I was having a rough time at the building inspection office. And my boss and I weren't getting along. So a situation came up where the economy wasn't doing that well in Prince George. A lot of construction went by the wayside because there was a depression that happened there to some forest industry downturns, thanks to a rumor that we were clear cutting the forests, and strip mining basically went around as a rumor. And it wasn't. We plant over 30 million trees a year in the province of BC, but that was not good enough. So anyway, not many people were building. So I lost my job. And my boss and I were arguing about things anyway. And so he disciplined me with some form. And then somebody else in the same employee would do the same thing, and they'd be off scot-free. So he was after me. So anyway, I lost the job. Reed fired. And the only game in town in all of the province of BC was Pemberton. So that's near Whistler. And so I went down there, and we didn't move from Prince George because we couldn't afford the housing down there. Our house in Prince George might have been worth about maybe 200,000, but the same building in Whistler or Pemberton was something like 800,000. So that was out of the picture. So I went down there and had some room and board. And while I was there, I painted for my wife for Christmas, Joan. And anyway, this is what I painted. I don't know if you can see that.
Beautiful.
And it's of the mountain valley near Pemberton, and this is 1 Mile Lake. Guess how far it is away from Pemberton? And that mountain range in the back is part of the Rockies. It's called the Bastion Range. And if you go from Pemberton, you go down the valley and up over those mountains, and you reach a community called Lillooet, which
Beautiful.
Sorry?
That's beautiful.
Picture. Wow.
Thank you. And while I was still in Pemberton, this is what I painted for a scene on the way to Vancouver called How Sound. And that's Anvil Island in the back. And most of the brickwork that was used for Vancouver buildings comes from the factory that used to be on Anvil Island. And you'll notice that there's not much reflection of the mountains in that scene, but that's not a lake. That's active tidewater from the Pacific Ocean. And so anyway, I haven't done too much after that. Thanks to Don Allen in Bernathen, he taught me how to paint. But I haven't gone back to it. This time does not serve me well to get at this kind of thing. And there's no room in the house to do that kind of thing anyway. So anyway, about my wife, Joan, we've been married 48 years. And how we met, it was March 9th of 1973. And I bought my very first pickup truck for my carpentry from her father. And when I was signing the papers for this sale, it was a 1970 GMC pickup. And I paid about, I don't know, $2,500 for it or something. Try and do that now. Try and buy a 3-year-old vehicle for about 20% of your wages. No, not happening. So anyway, he's writing up the sale and trying to close the deal. And he says, so young man, what else can I do for you? Is there anything I've missed here? I says, yeah, you can do something for me. And he says, what's that? I says, you can introduce me to that cute chick behind the counter. You stay away from her. That's my daughter. And you know, I always listen. So anyway, that's the long and the short of it. Now I'm retired. My wife still works for the Ministry of Children and Families, and she still works at that because she's in accounts payable, and she cranks out all these checks to various single mothers and that kind of thing that need that kind of backup or whatever the case may be. And she feels she can do more use that way. So she's staying there, and I'm at home and I'm being Mr. Mom. And I do the dishes and most of the cooking and what have you. What gripes me though about that is walking around in my bedroom slippers and my pink house coat and my hair in rollers. I don't like that too much. That's very demeaning somewhat. So anyway,
So your wife makes you do
Gilbert,
that, right?
are you waiting for me to come down there with a bunch of tools? I had to get rid of them coming to Vancouver, but I can get some more.
Thanks, Marv. Where are you living now?
I'm living in Vancouver.
Okay.
We're about 500 feet from the Vancouver General Hospital here, which is very handy as I cut myself pretty badly doing the dishes or something, and I cleaning out a glass or something, it snapped, and as I did the round, it cut my finger pretty badly. So I walked over to the hospital, and 5 hours later, they stitched me up, and then I walked home. And I don't know, it's just been one thing after another. About my relationship with the Lord, I often think that, well, he just, well, certain things happen. I wonder, what's that for? Where's the lesson there? How come that happened? I had to do that just so you, like, what's the lesson behind this little foible? Well, it's all designed to make you think and face your letdowns and your trials and tribulations as strong as you can be, I guess, and make you learn. It's the trials and tribulations that make us what we are today. And you might not like it, but looking back, you're higher up the hill now. You can see where you went wrong. And if you can't, well, you better get your act together, because you cannot have resentment if you go to the other world. If you hang on to that, you'll have the same attitude in the other world, and you can't have that and reap any success. And that's all I'll say for that. Okay. Hope you can endure all that.
Thank you, Marvin.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else just have comments on what we've heard in people's updates? Peter?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick statements to various people. John Kern, I remember you from when you moved to Bernathen. I was one of the 3 shortest kids in our class, and you were the tallest by far. And you were a big Green Bay Packers fan, and that was the years when Bart Starr was running the NFL, basically, and the Packers were winning the first 2 Super Bowls. And I don't know if you're still a Packers fan. You never said where you're living now, so I'm not sure.
I'm living in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., and I work in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm still a residual Packers fan. Yes.
Okay. Well, I've rooted for them with Rodgers and so on. But this year, finally, the Eagles did it. So
yes,
I'm really happy about that. Dale will be
Yeah,
excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Mary Jane, I remember you from high school. You were a Southern gal, and you had this gentle Southern accent. It's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know where it went. I used to really like that. I enjoyed that with you. So that was something that I remember fondly. And I also remember visiting you in California one time. I stayed over. I was on my motorcycle going up the coast, and happened to drop in and stay overnight with y'all. And that was the last time we were together. And that was in the in the late 70s. No, early 80s. It was the early 80s when I had that bike.
Thank you for reminding me of that. You know, those years we had the 4 boys who were
Right.
born in 5 years.
Yeah.
That so much of my life, some other people at that point, other people have to tell me went on, because I remember almost none of it. I think I was at a lot of exhaustion. I was and I loved being a mom, but I was pretty worn out. So thanks for coming to visit.
Yeah, sure. It was fun. Sonia, I remember you as being the bounciest Energizer bunny in our class.
Oh,
you
yeah.
were always busy with something, just bouncing here, there, and the other place. And it was just impossible to keep up with you. It was just, amazing everything you were able to accomplish in those years. I was always in awe and envious of that. As far as Marvin Friesen goes, when my dad and I built our retirement house in Tucson, he was a carpenter for many years. And the building inspectors that would come out, they would figure out, well, the code called for, say, 3 nails in a foot or whatever it was. And we would be putting 5 or 6 nails in that same space. So after the first 2 or 3 times checking us out, they said, oh, we don't need to worry about these guys. Their building will be still here when everybody else's is gone.
Oh.
And I'm hoping to go down and revisit that house. My mom and dad passed away, and we sold it. But the new owners, I want to go see them and tell them a few stories about that place. But that was always fun. They would come out and shoot the bull with us for a little while and sign our papers and move on their merry way.
One
And
thing
that-
about what you said about nails and so on, it's not how
Yeah.
many nails, but where you put them and why.
Right, right.
And
Well,
if
we
you put
we
too many
overbuilt the
nails,
house.
if you put too many nails in a piece of wood, you'll
Oh
shatter.
yeah, we'll break it. Oh yeah, sure. No question. We knew what we were doing. We
Dale,
get
I
it
owe
right.
you something and I'm sorry. But
Yeah.
I did not know how to put that whole thing together about the
Mm.
indigenous people in our country and how poorly they got treated.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's very, very involved. And well, one of the bad things that is that our government in Eastern Canada, it was Upper Canada and Lower Canada.
Huh.
That's all.
Huh.
What was out west was so far removed and
Yeah.
so remote and so pioneer that they didn't care less what happened out there.
Yeah, too bad.
So when people came to the government and said, we'd like to go and move out there with our church and set up a church school or something like that out there, and would you help fund us? And they said, oh yeah, you're going to look after all that? Here's some money. Just get out of our sight and don't come back.
Yeah.
So
Oh
they
well,
couldn't care less.
that's
But
how it goes.
they sent them out there with the caveat
Yeah.
that you can do that, but when you bring the Indians into, and he used the word Indian, when you bring the Indians into the school, take them away from the tribes completely. So in many respects, you saw what people saw with the Indigenous all across Canada is a bunch of drunken people. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. How would you feel if the government took your children away from you?
Right.
Not good.
I did the model too.
Yeah.
So, I know there's a lot of that kind of thing, and even building of the Alaska Highway with the American Army coming to help the Canadians, and the Canadians did a lot of work in that too. When they come to an indigenous village way out in the boonies, that have been there thousands of years, they would look at the place and just grab a gear in their cat and push the road through. They didn't care what was going on.
Yeah. Same thing happened in the Old West here.
And if you look back in the mankind throughout the world, that existed forever, for everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought that somebody else had something they wanted. So right away you have somebody trying to demean somebody else so that they can get there.
Yeah. Well, we have things we have to get done, so we got
Yes,
to
you do.
off, say adios.
Sorry.
Thank you, Marvin, Clymer, for doing this. This was
Welcome.
really fun.
Thanks
It
for
was
joining
so
us.
nice to meet all of you too.
Yeah.
Hey, Marvin, do we have time for a couple more questions for people?
Sure. Yep.
First of all,
Polly, I'll say, I figure we'll stay here as long as people have things to say. I may
okay.
change my mind on that, but go right ahead.
Well, I'll try to be quick here. Sony, I just wanted to reach out to you about your daughter. My youngest brother, Clay, I don't know if you know this, but Clay died at 55 of cancer.
Oh.
So I know the deep sadness, and I know the terror and the fear and all of the difficulty. So I'm going to keep my heart close to you and your daughter, because I still obviously cry about this, because it was just heartbreaking to lose this boy who was 16 years younger than I am. And Mary and Louise and Judy, you've lost people who were so important to you, who you loved so very much. And in 2021, the same year that Clay died, my dear husband lost his son at age 33 of alcoholic hepatitis. Max had the same disease as Eric. Eric is honoring 33 years of sobriety in May. So I know that what Louise said to you, Judy, is exactly right. It doesn't get better. It just gets a tiny bit easier to bear. And you just take it a day at a time. So I will keep you all and dear Mary with your sweet Bethany. Remember her lying on the floor here in the living room? I remember that. So I'm blessed to be with all of you. And Gilbert, I want to ask you where you are in Montana.
Missoula.
Okay, because I went to see John and Karen DeMaine when they had their place in Victor. And we drove north to Glacier and then south to Yellowstone. And I fell in love with Montana. It's a
Beautiful.
fabulous state. And your son is married to which of those wonderful pastors at Shadyside?
Kendra.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to be there at that church tomorrow. They're hosting a fabulous choral group, Dale, from England, Voces 8. So if I can
It's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If I can stop coughing long enough, I've had the flu all week, as had Eric. You know how you share the joy. But I will, maybe your son will be there with his wife. I would imagine all staff will be on hand.
Yeah.
So it's great to be with all of you. It really is. And to hear all you talk.
Yeah. I have a suggestion for all of you that are dealing with cancer. Since I've retired, what I like to do is do little research projects on my own to try and just keep up with what's happening with the science. And there have been a lot of people in my parish that have come down with cancer lately. And it's like, you ask the question like, well, why? I don't know if you can see this very well or not, but there's been a lot written and YouTubes you can find on this the last year or two on metabolic syndrome, metabolic approach to cancer, that basically says the medical institutions say that, oh, cancer is a genetic disease. There are scientists that are saying it's actually a metabolic disease where there's a part of the cell called the mitochondria with insults gradually over time that build up that change the mitochondria from using oxygen to create energy, ATP. It's got a long name, so you call it ATP. That it uses glucose and glutamine instead. And so that the theory is that you use a metabolic approach to cut down on the glucose and the glutamine in your diet so that you basically starve the cancer cells. And you can use this approach in conjunction with the traditional medical, chemotherapy and radiation and whatever. So it's something you may be interested in. So this book was written by Anasha Winters, who is a stage 4 ovarian cancer survivor, which is pretty rare. And the foreword is by Kelly Turner, who wrote the book Radical Remission. And what I like about this book is it has 10 different tables of asking questions. Have you been exposed to this? Have you been exposed to that? What about this? What about that? That can give you an idea of what actually leads to the development of cancer. It's a little bit different. The quote unquote formula and the equation for your body is different from everyone else. But this way you don't feel quite so helpless, like, why is this happening to me? And Radical Remission was a fascinating book because there are 9 characteristics of cancer survivors that this woman, PhD student, she interviewed people in a bunch of different continents and just absolutely fascinating. I think you'd find it very valuable to check that out.
Thank you.
And then there's a guy, Thomas Seyfried, Seyfried from Boston University, that he's a PhD biologist that does a lot of work in metabolic cancer. So some resources that may give you some comfort and some direction.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Dale's younger sister, Cara, she's one of the employees at the Swedenborg Foundation, and regardless of anybody's faith focus, about once a month, she leads a Zoom discussion like this called the Death Cafe.
Yeah.
And you can, if you currently have somebody who's died, or you still remember somebody who's died, or you're worried about your own death, it gives you a support group of people, and that nobody will tell each other what to believe or to think, but grief is okay. And she does this in person in Bernathen, but she also does it on Zoom. I've attended a few times once Heidi got her diagnosis. Heidi, I don't think, is on the edge of dying right now, but she has cancer. Anyway, I found it really wonderful. So Dale, you raised a good sister. Good job. Cara is really quite
Good
remarkable.
job.
Yeah, I didn't raise her. In fact, I left home when she was 13. So I feel I missed her growing up years. And I always regret that, but because she is a wonderful person.
She is a phenomenal person. And she gave a speech a couple of years ago that was audiotaped and videotaped.
I loved it. Yeah.
You know, you just don't want to stereotype somebody who's lived in Bernathen their whole life, because she's had such an interesting journey as she has evolved as a human being. She's just really marvelous. So it's so interesting to see how people evolve. I'm going to end, and then I have to leave. I was listening to a podcast the other day by a gerontologist who focuses on our age group. She hopes people will flourish in our elder years. And she says, to sum it up, maybe the first 6-7 decades of our life, we're trying to prove something to people, that we can do this, I can build a house, I can get a PhD. But at our age, we're just trying to improve. Maybe it's our spiritual life. Maybe it's our kindness to our partner or our family. Maybe it's to try to improve our faith. Maybe it's to try to figure out how to deal with conflict. Whatever it is, I think that's great. So moving from prove myself to I've got to improve. And to me, that is a gradual step toward, because I do believe in an afterlife. And I hope that I'll get to keep going to religious colleges when I get to the other world. In fact, there's things I want to sign up for. I want to learn how to sing. I want to learn how to dance. There's so many things I don't get to do now, but I hope to keep growing and improving my world.
You'll have an eternity to try it out.
I was going to say, yeah, try it. Make a start here, and then you can keep learning when you get there.
That's right. So I'm in the improving mode, and no longer have to prove anything to anybody. Okay, I got to go. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sunny.
Enjoyed seeing all of you today. This is really meaningful. Thank you, Marvin, for hosting.
Sure.
It was great.
I did have another question. I don't know if people intend to stay a little longer. We're coming up on 2 hours. But I was just kind of thinking, okay, well, what should we talk about if we run out of other things to talk about? And one thing I thought was, just kind of looking at how old we are, and how long we might be around. We might be around a day, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades. The way science is going, maybe 1 or 2 of us will make 3 decades from now, but obviously our time is limited. So my question to you is, what do you want to do or accomplish while you're still here?
What you mean is,
Marvin,
what do you want to do when we grow up?
That's right. Yes.
this is Mary Jane.
Bingo.
I don't know if can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
First of all, apologies. I thought I was muted when I was walking by a lot of traffic. I hope that didn't cause too many problems. But it's interesting. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? First, I want to say, as all my family knows, I feel like I've had a very full and happy life, and that I don't feel like I need another in general, wouldn't feel like I needed another day to feel incredibly thankful for all my life has held. And I had a couple of opportunities. One, when I was during a few years ago, got pretty sick, and for the first time in my life, landed in the hospital, and really feel confident that I was given the option inside of my heart to say goodbye to this world, or to go on to the next. And it was a bit of a realization, an aha for me, to think, well, Lord, not quite yet. What I really want to make sure of before I'm gone is, well, that each of my grandchildren knows that they're incredibly loved and important to, of course, they are to their parents, but to even to someone more than that, someone, another person in this world. I, I would love them to know that their lives matter, that they are significant, and to the extent that whatever faith I can share with them helps that, and or whatever. That's probably the most important thing to me, as far as what I still want to make sure happens before I leave this world. Yeah, I'd say that's the biggie for me. So I'd love to hear what other people want to share.
Hey, Marvin.
I'd like to figure out a way to forgive myself and others that have wronged me, and let go of that resentment. Just ditch it. Get rid of it somehow. Replace it with something else, but maybe to become more useful, because that's one thing I feel I've lost in becoming retired. I can no longer help people in construction or whatever. I've got about, well, better than 50 years in construction, if you include the 29 years as an inspector. But I used to teach carpenters and apprentices and so on, and try and get them to get through the trade and everything else that's that complicates it. And yeah, that kind of thing. I remember one of my students in the apprenticeship carpentry class. He said, Marvin, he says, when a project is finished, what is it supposed to look like? What a question. But it's valid. But what I came up with was, when your project is finished, whatever it is you're working on, and this extends to other things too, is it should look like you weren't there. In other words, no hammer marks, no split pieces of lumber. And you know, if you look at a fence that's been built by somebody and the spaces are mismatched and irregular and so on, well, quite simply, it looks like hell. So if it's all in order and all of the top of the pickets are in the same level and that kind of thing, it looks like you weren't there, like it was cranked out of a machine. And we're like that in our lives, I think, that everything went smoothly and you're not remembered because of the foibles you or mistakes you made. So it should be a seamless entry and a seamless exit out of that project, whatever it is. And as far as being useful, Jones told me that we are being useful as old people and commenting or helping young people to get through it all like we had to. And that's my one and only goal. Well, two. Forget and get rid of the resentment and just be more useful somehow. So
Thank you.
In a nutshell.
Louise?
Resentments too, and it wasn't until about I could never relate to, well, you need to forgive someone. It's like, well, how do you do that? It just, all of the normal ways of explaining forgiveness just didn't resonate with me. But what did, I think I was reading a book on gratitude, but the concept that helped me was that for the most difficult situations you've been in and the most difficult people you've had to deal with, think back on what you learned for them. It could be a very painful lesson. It could be a very productive lesson, but it was that in your mind, and if you want to actually express it to the person, that's something else, but it's like, gee, I thank you for teaching me blah, 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 because it helped me do X, Y, Z in another situation where I was successful using the skills that I learned from this, whatever the traumatic situation was. And that way I've been able to, I don't know if I necessarily forgive, but it's eliminated the angst and the resentment for me. And it was a unique approach I'd never heard anywhere else, and it just was very helpful. It just took the steam out of the resentment. It's like, oh, I actually got something good out of this bad situation. So you might want to think about that. And I guess there's two things that I was thinking about your question, Marvin, last year, and I thought I want to be able to grow spiritually, to grow closer to God. And I wanted to understand his word and understand how providence works a little bit better. And I want to be productive and contribute something. I'm not necessarily sure or aware of what I'm contributing. In some cases I can, in something I don't know. And I want to help this world be a better place when I go. Kind of simple, hard to do.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. John, I'm sorry, I just saw something in front of your picture. Does anybody else want to add anything? Okay.
I do need to get back up because I walked away from the group and some people are going to have to be leaving. Hopefully haven't left, but I'm going to head back to my godson's visiting and kids. So but I'm so grateful, Marvin. Thank you for getting folks together. It's been a wonderful thing to hear voices and see faces. God bless you all.
Thanks for joining us, Mary Jane.
Thank you.
Bye, Mary.
Get going too. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay.
It's been
Lovely to have you.
Oh, Louise.
so nice.
All of you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's
Thank
been
you.
been 2 hours, so that seems like a good length of time, I would say. So I'm ready
Yeah.
to end it.
Yeah.
I don't know what Mary's thinking. Oh, here comes Mary again. But I'm just saying, I'm thinking this would be a good time to end it. We can do another one of these another time.
It was so good to
see
see
what we do.
everybody. So good.
It really has
Good.
been. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks for joining,
Thanks,
giving up
Marvin.
some time.
My heart just went.
Good to hear. Okay, thank you. And I will be sharing a link to where this will be posted. I'm planning to put it on YouTube. And so if you want to listen to it again, and I did hear from several people who could not join us that they certainly would like to see it, the recording of it. So I will be doing that, and we'll take it from there and see whether we do it again. Hopefully we can. Thanks again
Thanks
for
very
joining.
much,
So
Marvin.
blessings to all of you. Take care.
Okay.
God
And to you,
bless.
Louise.
To everyone,
Bye.
stay in my mind.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.